Ah, South Africa, a country where every standard of living is repeatedly going down, even on a continent where almost every standard is going up. And, during the South African elections, there's one province that has never voted for the ruling party. So, many say, what if this province, the Western Cape, became its own country? This movement may sound fringe, and in many ways it still is, but its popularity has recently gone over the halfway mark, and support for it is rising. So, why is this a thing? Who supports it? And could this actually happen? Let's find out. This movement has existed for a long time, but never really came into the mainstream until the end of apartheid, when the Western Cape Province became the only party not to vote for the new ANC, instead opting for the new National Party. The ANC did take over the Western Cape from 2004 to 2009 during a period of substantial economic growth, arguably South Africa's peak. However, the Democratic Alliance has governed the Western Cape ever since. The movement mainly started in 2007, with the Cape Party being formed, and the goal of creating a Western Cape country in the Cape area with all Cape provinces. This was started due to the frequency of South Africa using policies intended to affect people based on race, or as some said, the ANC became what it set out to destroy. However, this originally went nowhere, as this was a time of substantial economic growth for South Africa, and especially the Western Cape. Over the years, however, government corruption and load shedding began to give rise to parties like Cape Exit, the Cape Independence Party, and the Sovereign State of Good Hope. During the COVID pandemic, the Cape Independence Advocacy Group was formed, and that same year, the Freedom Front Plus, which is a Boer rights party, came out in support of Cape independence. The 2021 South African social unrest showed that the country was continuing to spiral out of control, causing the movement to pass 50% support, especially showing that the rest of the country's problems were beginning to creep in on the Western Cape. Currently, the Western Cape is seeking more power to do things their way, including police, and one bill called the Western Cape People's Bill seeks to legally recognize the Western Cape people as separate from the rest of South Africa. In October 2023, an ultimatum was sent by the Cape Referendum Alliance asking the Premier of the Western Cape if he would call a referendum on Cape independence. However, he said no. In response, the Referendum Party was founded with the aim of keeping the DA government in power, while also pressuring them to hold a referendum. Some of their arguments include, number 1, the Western Cape people have barely voted ANC, 2, most people in the Western Cape speak a language known as Afrikaans, 3. Non-racialism. The scars of apartheid have made two things. 1. Black people who suffered greatly at the hands of apartheid now have grown resentment to white people, which is kind of understandable, resulting in African nationalism, which is the belief that black people own South Africa, and everyone else is a guest. So, they campaign for things like Afrikaans to be taken away from universities, and Boer rights suppressed. One party, called the EFF, even wants to kill every white person in South Africa. Communism, everyone. This treatment then causes resentment from Boers who then act discriminatory towards black people. These black people then feel discriminated against, causing them to campaign for things like, yeah, you get what I mean, cycle repeats. So the current South African government is very against white people, and many laws have been passed in South Africa recently, which have set out to give people less rights or put them out of their jobs based on race. And, lastly, stability. People see the riots in 2021 as evidence that South Africa is collapsing. Many people across the country agree that the Western Cape is better governed than the rest of the country, causing illegal migrants to flood the province. So, many want to close the border to keep those migrants out. However, many oppose this, saying that it is racially motivated, seeking to bring back apartheid. Polls show that most supporters of Cape independence are white or colored, but other than that, the only reason this is a thing is the belief that any leader in South Africa that is white wants to bring back apartheid. However, once the Cape Independence Party was accused of being racist after posting a photo depicting the Western Cape as a mix of black people, white people, and brown people, and the rest of South Africa being black, as well as a diagram of the Western Cape being Ukraine and the rest of the country being the Soviet Union. This was later apologized for. Many also criticize the legality of it. Even though the Western Cape Premier can call a referendum, the United Nations and South Africa also recognize the right to self-determination for people. Saying South Africa is denying the results of the referendum would probably be met with international pressure, and The case of Quebec is usually used in this sense as evidence that this could happen. After the Quebec referendum, Canada made a law basically saying that if a province wants to leave, this is the criteria. I don't know why this is so widely sorted though. South Africa was not part of that law, this is a Canadian law, but I guess it is kind of a good enough framework for how Cape Independence could potentially work. Another thing that I see a bit of skepticism about is how could this even be governed? They haven't really said, would this country be a democracy? What laws would it have? What friends would it have? And in general, how would the country be run? I get that they're mostly just trying to sort out the referendum stuff, but you've got to figure out what you're going to do after Cape Independence. Also, last thing I want to touch on, this is the Cape Independence flag. There's usually two different types, this cross one, and this sort of plus one with an anchor. This cross one seems to be the more widely used one, and the cross one's symbolism is even meant to stand for a check signifying yes to independence, which is pretty cool symbolism if you ask me. Currently, South Africa is nearing an election, and we will see what the referendum party will do, and what the future holds for South Africa and the Western Cape. I will surely be looking at this, because this video will become irrelevant in a matter of days.